We are about to get this right. We are about to get this right. Everybody who can hear my voice, we are about to get this right. Shout out to Darth Skywalker in the building. We had some technical difficulties in the previous stream, but we are about to get this right. We are about to get this right. And I'm gonna wait in for some of my guests to be able to make it. We are going to discuss, Ivan Van Sertima on trial. Shout out to Joe Bailey. Shout out to everybody in the building. Shout out to everybody out there. I just sent the link to my guest, and I will continue onward where we left off. I will continue onward where we left off. My apologies for the previous issues. Yeah, StreamYard is a little bit more stable. I was getting frustrated with OBS. I was getting really frustrated with OBS. OBS is cool. OBS is cool when, but, but it's not so cool when the lost frame rate causes the system to crash. I need to get my charger.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. Kanji, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Good.
I can hear you
All right,
loud and
brilliant.
clear. I need to find my charger before my computer dies. That cannot happen.
The thing
But I can
with
hear you loud.
me and King was saying, OBS was. I remember using OBS. It's great for when you're just doing it on your own, when you're just chatting on your own. It's great control and everything. But when you have to interview someone, when you have like more than one person on it, it's like it just goes
It's
to
not good. It's not good
no.
at all. At all, yeah. And that's why I kind of didn't want to use it, but uh yeah, Reggie just tried to call me. But all good. I hope everybody is here in live and full effect. I'm gonna text him real quick and tell him I rebooted it. I'm gonna send him the link actually. I'm gonna send him a link, make sure that he has access to it so he can come on as well. But yeah, I hope King can make it too.
He can.
There
He's
he
just
is.
gonna.
Hey, there he is. Shout out to King.
I'm
You
sitting
gotta
there
be
patiently. You lot like, oh, I hope King can make it. Let me in, dude.
shout out to King. Shout out to King. I'm glad that you made it. I'm glad that we're all here.
Are you gonna start a new YouTube stream?
Yeah, this is the stream. We've already started
Oh,
it.
it's already started. Okay, let me find it.
Yeah, we've already started it. I just wanted to get it hop into it. So, again, like I'm gonna run it back again, and I'm gonna give it to King. I'm gonna pass the rock to King. Um, okay, Harvard's Allen Ancient DNA database, as y'all know, they sequenced Fernandez Saracatal 2020, the 9th century individual, I-13200 from El Soco, Dominican Republic, reported with chromosome haplogroup BTM91. And this finding validates, Ivan Van Sertima, his model, right? Now, if you go to Harvard's Allen Ancient DNA resource, you see a validation in the AADR of Lipson et al.'s analysis, Kenneth Lipson and Prufer et al.'s analysis of the 5th millennia BCE individual I-19944 from Saki-Sul, Belize, right, reported with BTM91. And this finding, again, validates validates the model, right? This validates the model, right? So now if we turn the page and we go to the Ancient DNA Explorer, Ancient DNA XP, it shows that the 9th century individual from Chichen Itza carries African haplogroups B2-182, BTM91, and that's YCH025, YCH026, YCH038. So this different sequencing of these haplotypes, genetics has a lot of variance, as you know. King brilliantly puts the S&P arrays. There's a lot of bias. When you reveal the bias in the S&P arrays, the microarrays, it shows why genetics is tinged towards Eurasians and against Africans. But the Harvard AADR, Allen Ancient DNA Resource Database, and the Herplex-based Ancient DNA Explorer found African-rooted haplotypes using a more rigorous sequencing approach. So that brings us to Guadarrama in 1973.
So can I just ask a question about those two panels you've mentioned? Is there anything that gives any data about the size of those panels in terms of the number of SNPs they look at? Is there any?
I'm to my understanding, now I may be incorrect about this, but from my understanding, they use the 1240K panel.
Okay.
But it could have been, because I know that one is biased towards Eurasians. So
it's still filtered, but they just maybe have a lens on certain genes that are perhaps ignored sometimes in other people's methods. Is that kind of, so it's not using whole genome, basically. It's still filtering down. I'm just trying to, if you don't know, that's fine. I'm just trying to kind of like, I want to read into these ones that you've mentioned.
No, exactly. No, I think that I don't think that either of them, because I think that Harvard's AADR and Allen Ancient DNA Explorer, their usage of 1240, like the ones that I saw, it wasn't necessarily completely on the side of Africans per se, and they didn't, as you stated, they didn't use the whole genome method. They cite a paper, Lazaridis, in 2018, that is the source of their methodological approach. So I could send you that paper. And it's basically why they state in the subtext, there is some variance with what they sequence versus what the paper themselves found.
Got it. Okay.
So this is
obviously my big issue with the 12, anyone using even like the 1240K one, is obviously the 1240K is telling you how many it's using 1.2 million SNPs. And, we even Eurasians have over 10 million. Africans have closer to, 15 or something. So, it's a huge filtration that's taken place there. So obviously that's like that's my headline beef with the use of any of these S&P panels. But yes, that's what I was kind of trying to drill down. But it's interesting you say that, because I don't think necessarily that using any kind of filtration is always bad, because they have other panels like the AGR, which actually uses less than the 1240K model, but it's much more judicious in the way that it's spread, in that it's not Eurocentric, so it's able to pull out really rich data for African groups as well. So that was just basically where the question was coming from. But yeah, thanks for that.
Oh, most definitely. And from my understanding, they took a very rigorous approach in their database to these sequencing findings, even though it wasn't perfect. But it's just interesting how, when they find a Black African quote unquote haplotype, everybody wants to cry foul. Not legit. It's not supposed to happen. You're not supposed to have Africans in ancient Mexico. Right, but these findings, right? Guadarrama, he did a non-metric trait analysis, and this corroborates with Roginski in Tatalico. And I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, but this is a Mesoamerican site, pre-Columbian site, and he finds a gracile type with short faces, quadrangular orbits, and non-projective zygomatics, and then a robust type with dolichocephalic, elongated faces, rounded orbits, prominent supraorbital ridges, and anteriorly projecting zygomatic bones, right? So the analysis confirmed there is a notable anterior projection of the zygomatomaxillary tubercle and it was absent in the habitual type, but present in 40% of the different types. And this corroborates with the prognathic morphology that Wierzyński found for his equatorial or Dongolan type. So what do you have to say about that?
So without using too many long words, from the description, the first type, when you read this out first time, my head straight away went to the first type sounds like a kind of like your more stereotypical Asians. When I say Asians, I mean Far East Asians, but then they've only given us limited data on that. So they've given us the fact that they've got short faces, quadrangular orbitals, and they don't project, or in terms of their zygomatic structure doesn't project, so their cheeks don't project, which is what you typically get with your Far East Asians. But they could have given us like the cephalic indices as well, because that would have given us more of an indication. If they were like strongly brachycephalic, then that would have definitely leaned towards them being a Far East Asian, or possibly Andaman Islander types as well. But then the second group is 100% without a doubt a group that would be kind of physiognomically aligned with African groups. So you've got rounded faces, rounded orbits, prominent zygomatic projection. They're talking about their subnasal. Did they mention subnasal prognathism as well? I think you did. Did you? I can't remember actually. Let me read it. Significant. So maxillary. So the zygomatic maxillary. So that's kind of like I'm guessing that's a protrusion of the cheek and the upper jaw, the maxillary. So that would have been So this is like a more kind of like stereotypical, quote unquote, African group. I don't like to say. So the difficulty is when it comes to African groups, I talk about this a lot, the fact that we exhibit certain phenotypic traits that other groups don't exhibit, like the ones that are being mentioned here, but we're not. So I have to preface though, we're not restricted to those traits. So that's for everyone who's we're not restricted to those traits. That first person has been described. There are Black African groups that fit that description as well. So this is difficult. So these could be two Black groups, to be very, very clear. These could be two Black groups, but I would say more generous, and also to be kind of like, maybe I don't want to say realistic, because I probably should do a little bit more anthropology in the area of the Americas, but to be kind of like more judicious in terms of what's currently already believed, I would say that first group is probably more leaning to your stereotypical Far East Asian, perhaps Polynesian type. And then the second group is more Africoid. That's what I would say based on what you said there.
For sure. Yeah, no, that's definitely a really, really good breakdown, because again, if we're to believe a lot of these Western scholars, they will say that, that type was not present. We never had that type present in Mesoamerica. But if you're familiar with Paleo-American morphology, there are different ancient remains like Lucia that some scholars have posited has a, craniometrics closer to Melanesians and Africans, right? So this would be some evidence corroborating that. So moving on, now we see Martin Bernal, and Martin Bernal defended Ivan van Sertima. A lot of people try to say Ivan van Sertima is pseudoscientific. Ivan van Sertima did not have a rigorous scientific approach, but that's not the case. Martin Bernal, he wanted to just go against what he saw as really hypocritical dismissal of Ivan van Sertima, particularly by the 1997 Current Anthropology Forum. Now, most of the arguments against the African presence in pre-Columbian Mesoamerica is rooted and comes from this forum, this Current Anthropology Forum, right? So this is something that we need to understand. These guys are not honest actors. There's a very polemical approach to their analysis of Ivan van Sertima, right? So he dismissed its heretical tone. It was almost religious. And unlike scholars like Velikovsky or von Daniken, who posit ancient alien theories and different, ancient cataclysmic theories when they, used their archaeological approach. Van Sertima's hypothesis, according to Bernal, violated no scientific canons. And there's nothing inherently impossible about the transatlantic contact within the last 5,000 years, according to the evidence and the data that we have. So Ivan Van Sertima, according to Martin Bernal, he used standard anthropology, the standard anthropology of his day, using methods like Tyler's criteria of arbitrariness, collocation, and gradual development, right? When it came to, the peopling and material cultural evolution and some of the instances that we can discern of contact. He's using Tyler's 3 criteria, right? And he finds these criteria of arbitrariness, collocation, and gradual development in the source culture to link specific traits such as the basalt heads, pyramid structures, and terracotta figurines between Africa and Mesoamerica. So according to Bernal, Ivan Van Sertima was applying, this rigorous analysis, right? And Bernal states that these scholars are unfairly demanding incontrovertible archaeological proof, like African artifacts in controlled digs. And again, these scholars would dismiss the German-Mexican historian and scholar von Wuthenau's, terracotta analysis. But they said they want incontrovertible archaeological proof to validate Sertima's contact model. But this standard is not applied in other prehistorical studies, as shown by the relative acceptance of Viking settlement in Newfoundland prior to definitive excavation, right? Onto Meadows in the 11th century, they found, a settlement excavation. So instead of this unrealistic requirement that isn't applied, Bernal championed Sertima's method of using cultural and historical evidence to build a case based on competitive plausibility. Like if you look at the technological expertise when it came to navigation, of Western Africans, and you look at the relative degree of cultural and historical evidence, there is a competitive plausibility case that can be used to, affirm the model, right? And Bernal also, posited that transatlantic voyages from Africa to the Americas were just as easy or easier than voyages from Europe or Asia, right? And again, in Asia, you have to cross the Pacific Ocean, which is a lot larger than the Atlantic Ocean, right? And feel free to stop me if you two want to chime in.
I mean, the only thing I would say is we just got to be realistic about the fact that Europeans weren't sailing to the Americas until Africans taught them. The only question is which Africans taught them. We don't know if it was the North Africans that taught them or the West Africans that taught them. It's one of those two groups, but that's just the bottom line. We know the trail of events that led up to Columbus's 1492 first voyage, and that involved, essentially bringing Africa under the thumb, and that's when they then were able to make that journey. So,
Yeah, and according to research by Pathy Diang, and he kind of took the Diopian approach, because many people don't know this, but Diop actually approached this, ancient pre-Columbian African contact model from a standpoint of navigation technology, and Pathy Diang kind of continued in that pathway. And Ivan Van Sertima, Diop actually admitted this in his review of They Came Before Columbus. Ivan Van Sertima beat him to the punch, right? So Diop spoke about, the technology, sailboat technologies. A lot of people think only East Africans developed sailboats. But according to Portuguese and Dutch and French explorers, there are Africans who had traditional sailboat technologies based upon fiber, raffia palm, and woven leaves and woven textiles, right? So this technological approach has always been part of the analysis, the Diopian side of the analysis, in terms of the African Mesoamerica contact model, right? So Bernal, he uses historical reports of Abu Bakari's Atlantic voyage. And again, a lot of the Pan-Africanist in name only, a lot of the chronologists who want to castigate the ability of African people to develop naval technology. They want to take Thomas Sowell's approach and say that there was a geographic restriction that limited the ability of Africans of the Black race to develop naval technologies, right? You have primary documentation provided by Momuni Kuyate, who is a Drumolog and a griot, who has oral testimonies, not only detailing the initial voyage by Abubakar in the 14th century, but also, the trade. And we're going to get into some of the items that were traded that we have evidence for, archaeological evidence on both sides of the Atlantic, right?
Mhm.
So Bernal, you want to say something, King?
No, I was just agreeing with you. But it's
Okay.
just I think you made an interesting statement with the black. You said it, but I know that's exactly how it's been stated to you. People doubt the credibility of Africans, and they preface by saying black people. Really,
Yeah.
that's what they're saying, and it's really ridiculous because the argument for black presence in America has always been multi-pronged. It's never been singular.
Yeah.
So yes, we can talk about like you are today, I should say. The voyages or the navigations from West and Northwest Africa to the Americas, but also people are just seeming to, for some reason, forgetting that even to present day, a large part of the Indian Ocean is inhabited by black people.
Yeah.
So the very Polynesians and the very people who you said were capable of making that journey to the Americas, and the population that were responsible for people in it, you're saying that they didn't take none of the black people, only the Chinese looking ones went. It's kind of like, is that the argument that's being made, that no Fijians made that journey because Fijians are black?
Yeah, and here's the thing about it. It's interesting that you bring that up. In the Americanist, and I'm going to get into it in one of the slides, they have a bias similar to Africanist when it comes to, the pre-Columbian contact. They're willing to accept that Asians crossed the Pacific Ocean and made it to the Americas less than Europeans, because on the first note, they say the Vikings, the blonde-haired, blue-eyed Europeans, they were intelligent enough to cross the Atlantic before the Columbus. Then tentatively Asians and some of these Melanesian populations, but they don't want to call them black, may have gotten here, but they don't want to accept the shortest and easiest trip from the Africans, especially not the West Africans, because then that unseats the white supremacist hierarchy.
Well, the Viking, claim is ridiculous. Anyway, I'll let you carry on, man. It's just, it's amazing how little evidence the European claims need in relation to the black claim. Because I always do want people to remember that irrespective of the West African journeys, which I think you're doing a very good job improving right now, there is still the very, very logical argument that there is a indigene in Asia and Polynesia, Australasia, for want of a better word, that are black.
Yes.
And everyone is fine with the fact that these people made the journey. No one is arguing that Polynesians, for instance, have a presence in the Americas or ancestors of the Polynesians.
Yep.
But then everyone wants to ignore the fact that Polynesians, a large proportion of them, are black. It's like, what are we doing here? Do you understand what I mean? It's like, so we black people crossed from Asia into the Americas, and their population is not small. We're not talking about minority populations here. We're talking about large populations. The Aita of the Philippines. These were the indigenous people. All the people in Far East Asia know who the indigene are. Yeah, they are black people we'd call black, irrespective of them being West African or not. They are black. So you have to accept the fact that their phenotype found its way into the Americas.
100%. And the exact trace, I don't have this slide here, but Plasmodium vivax, the pathogens, that's one of the pathogens that, you can see going from Africa to Asia to Oceania to America. And there's numerous scholars who have affirmed that. So we're going to get into American cotton and maize in Africa before Columbus. Is that true? You want to say something?
Yeah. Sorry. What's the study you cited at the beginning of this live about the African genetics that was found in America?
Those were that's Harvard. So you see Fernandez Sirac et al. In 2020. That was a study on certain Caribbean populations. Then you have Kenneth Lipson and Prufer et al. That was a study on Baja Californians. And then you have the Chichen Itza study by Barquera et al. I think that was another study on indigenous North Mexicans or North Mexicans, indigenous Californians. So I can send you the DOI numbers.
Is that in the pack you sent us?
Yeah, that is, and I
Cool.
can send you the DOI numbers for each study.
Okay.
And as I stated before, the database cites a different Y chromosome haplotype than the study itself because they used a different sequencing methodology than those studies. So going back to the tenuous nature of DNA.
But it's the same haplogroup, it's just labeled differently, you're saying?
No, it's the same individual, but a completely different haplotype sequenced.
Right. How is that? So it's got different haplotypes. I don't.
Well, I mean, if you're familiar with Ramses II, maybe King could help out a little bit here. Ramses, according to certain sequencing, he had, or Ramses III rather, he had EM2 haplotype. Now, other people came, behind that and used different sequencing, and it came out as E1B1B, also came out as J, trying to say that he was an Arab, right? So there's different approaches that you could use with respect to the arrays that may give you a different result with the final gene.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, those people who've come out with different ones, because the only official studies we've got have said that that hasn't changed as far as I'm concerned. He's still E1B1A.
Yeah.
I don't think that's changed. I think you get a lot of these online morons who think they know how to sequence DNA and run to these like websites, and I laugh at these guys because they really think they're DNA experts. They run to these websites and oh yeah, we've seen, like, what are you doing? Like you don't know.
But they're always gonna go with the study that they like, aren't they? They're always gonna go with the one that shows.
It's not even a study. They won't even get studies. A lot of these guys have got these little websites that they plug their data into. I remember I was arguing online with some guy who you guys know, but I'm not going to give him any shine on here. And he was arguing with me about the percentage of we're talking about the two brothers basically from Asian TG. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but you're saying, oh yeah, they're 70% this, 8% this. So I went to the study, and the study blatantly said that they only had their uniparental lineage, i.e. we only have their mitochondrial DNA and their Y DNA. We haven't done autosomal DNA. So he's there arguing percentages with me, and he doesn't even have the data necessary to get a percentage, because Y DNA and this uniparental lineages don't give you percentages. They just give you that single ancestor. So it's like, these are the kind of people you're going to end up arguing with online who think they know what they're doing. As far as we know, published data, Ramesses III is E1B1A, and he remains that, until another published study comes out and says otherwise.
Yeah, facts. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, you guys were talking about this, the fact that Martin Bernard was talking about how there's nothing actually inherently impossible in it, and this was what I based a live I did a few months back on this. This was exactly what I based it on. I based it on the fact that let's compare the standard for Viking interaction with the New World. Let's compare the standards for that and compare it against the standards for Van Sertima's claims. It's completely double standards. It's completely double standards. And Martin Bernal, he didn't even need to go into massive detail on Van Sertima's work. He just showed that hypocrisy up for what it was. And I did a video on that actual topic, and I started it by saying, look, here's what we actually know about the Viking discovery of Newfoundland and whatnot. It's very, very tenuous. It's the kind of thing that if it was Africans that were proposing, it was Van Sertima that was proposing it, the stuff they're using as evidence. If it was him proposing it, they'd laugh him out of the room. They'd say, this is rubbish. What, you found a few, like, but yeah, it's just mental, man.
Facts. And this describes like Thomas Lynch and Hazlitt Vieira, who was part of the current anthropology in 1997. He admitted personally to Martin Bernal that among Americana scholars, they accept Viking contact. They're kind of middle ground on Asian contact, but they absolutely reject African contact. And it's just personal bias. Even some Pan-Africanists who don't want to help the Abos, they don't want to help the Pretendians. I call them Pan-Africanist in name only, Panos, because they denigrate African technological history. They're in the same boat with the ideological bias.
I think there is this thing that you do pick up where people who are, Pan-African, or really feel a need to kind of like vehemently argue against the black presence in America because they feel like if they feel like they're selling out by saying I'm not 100% African. And I understand in some ways the sentiment behind it. It's kind of like Africa is this thing that the world has been trying to convince you to hate for such a long time. And it does take a lot for people to kind of like overcome all of that and say, I'm going to embrace my Africanity, to then have your worldview entirely spun again to find out that, hey, there were black people in the Americas all along. And I might carry some of that ancestry. So I get where they're coming from, because there is a lot of kind of like, there's a lot of tribalism involved with this, and it's very, very complex, and it's very difficult because even some people who hear me on this stream might be confused as the fact that, hey, I'm yes, I'm absolutely okay with there being black presence in the Americas. In fact, I'm dead certain there was black presence in the Americas, prior to the transatlantic slave trade.
100%, and the evidence proves it. So a lot of people, they tried to go against Ivan van Sertima because they said his expertise is Kiswahili lexicography. He is not a specialist in Mesoamerican studies. But this is kind of a bias that's negating the history of many of these scientific fields, because outsiders have always contributed to the development of these fields. Heterodox, autodidact people. William Jennings Bryan's contributions to economics and Heinrich Schliemann's contributions to archaeology are cited as examples. So just because you have an unconventional background doesn't automatically invalidate your ideas. And Bernal wanted to evaluate Van Sertima on the merits, rather than dismissing it because the Mentepi ships in the Kiswahili coast certainly could have traded, into the Americas before Columbus if they got to India. I don't see how that kind of negates Sertima. That's a lot of bias. Now we have Ann Cipher, Olmec archaeologist, and she came against Van Sertima with a lot of the similar claims that Panos makes, similar claims that a lot of these Mesoamerican scholars make, that Sertima's arguing it's a mischaracterization, that he's claiming that Native Americans couldn't have advanced technological development on their own. But Sertima stated that necessary for indigenous achievement. So his argument is that Africans may have contributed to certain cultural developments. That's his specific argument, not necessarily that Native Americans were incapable of creating advanced civilizations on their own. So Ann Cipher on the right is one of the members of the Current Anthropology in 1997 forum, prominent Olmec archaeologist, and she was just shilling, for Westerners, against Sertima's contact model. So, people say that Ivan van Sertima is pseudo. The picture on the right is him with his second wife, right? And according to the latest publication of the UNESCO General History of Africa, these are the elite publications. In volume 10, Dr. Carol Boyce Davies, in her article about the epistemological basis for claiming Black identity, references Dr. Sertima's global African framework in his book that came before Columbus. And she identified this work, this global African framework, as a pivotal contribution to the struggle for Black liberation and Pan-African consciousness, right? This is a modern 2025 contemporary publication citing Van Sertima's scientific work. This is one of 3. This is volume 10. In the previous volume, in volume 9, you had Dr. Olabi B.J. Yai and Dr. Marshall Zay Belinga, and they reference Dr. Sertima to highlight Africa's advanced nautical technology, revealing transoceanic seafaring expertise that long preceded Portuguese expeditions. For all the detractors who say that Ivan van Sertima is pseudoscientific, why would he be published in the elite publication in African history, the UNESCO Symposium's General History of Africa, in volume 10, in volume 9, by contemporary African scholars who are talking about African nautical technology? Obviously, it's a model that has been validated and continued and expanded upon in many aspects, and you still see contemporary African scholars using it and utilizing it. Now, this is where it gets fun, right? So, this is the part where people demand distinct archaeological excavations, distinct inscription, material evidence, right? They demand material evidence. Well, when it comes to, both Americana scholars and African centered scholars, we have American archaeologist Dr. David Kelly. And Dr. David Kelly, he taught at the University of Calgary, one of the Canadian universities, and he noted the presence of the African Libyan script in the Americas. Right, so this is an Americanist scholar who, said, "Hey, Sertima and some of these other African scholars are right about this." So you have other scholars such as Onuegbu, Rashidi, Winters, Van Sertima, Wangara, Moncayo, and Kamugisha have noted parallels between Tifinagh, which is a variant of Libyan, Mandinka or Mandinka in West Africa, as well as script traditions that later developed in the Americas. And these similarities suggest orthographic filiation aligning with the patterns of aerial diffusion that we could observe linguistically between Mixozoian and Paleo-African languages. And these affirm that there was some pre-Columbian transoceanic contact, because that's the only way to get aerial diffusion between languages, if you have contact between the populations. So right here, these is a small collection of some of the similarities that we can see within the inscription methodology. So the M glyphs would be the Proto-Mandinka glyphs that are also seen in the Rampa markings that are used in cattle cultures in the Senegambian region, as well as the Greater Ho Depression, the Ouagadougou area, the Ouagadougou Empire area, as well as descendant populations. Many scholars have theorized that later scripts like in Ko and Vai, which came from secret societies, most likely are derived from these ancient Saharan scripts. So you have the Mande there, and the Rampas would be the FN glyphs and the SF glyphs, as well as the PL. This PL that you see right here, this FN right here, this FN right there, and this pyramid SF right there, right? So, and then right here you have the La Mojera stele, as well as the Tuxtla stele in Mesoamerica. And you can see commonalities, inscription, orthographic commonalities between these glyphs in Mesoamerica, pre-Columbian Mesoamerica, that you find in Western Africa, corroborating with the Americanist scholar Dr. David Kelly noted, right? So this would be an example of specific archaeological evidence or contact, right? Especially as it relates to orthography. So now let's get into the fun part. A lot of people said Ivan Van Sertima was wrong. He shouldn't have used Barry Fell, the Harvard scholar who was an expert in sea urchins. He was an expert in sea urchins. What do sea creatures have to do with the history of Mesoamerica? Well, according to Johannes Krauss and his research on Peruvian mummies, he reveals that their ancient tuberculosis strain was the most closely related to a form infecting marine animals. And they posited that these seals brought tuberculosis from Africa to South America, from Africa to the Americas. So this human-seal interaction facilitated a transoceanic transfer. Now, again, a lot of times seals, they like to follow sailing humans, right? So the fact that they were able to carry this tuberculosis strain that infected humans across the Atlantic speaks to some voyaging that was occurring on the behalf of the humans. So for those who say that Sertima was wrong for using Barry Fell, according to Krauss, sea creatures like seals played a pivotal role in the transfer of these pathogens affecting humans.
So 1 second. Sorry.
Go ahead.
So yeah. Okay. I'm just so he's suggesting that Africans infected seals and then the seals infected Americans.
Yes.
And that's not a cope. No.
No, I mean, it's not, but like, honestly, the more likely scenario is that the humans affected humans, right? That's the more likely scenario. That's the more common sense scenario. But for those,
what's the backstory in terms of human seal interaction on both sides of the Atlantic That's, oh, we should be calling it the Ethiopic. What's the backstory? As far as I know, humans and seals, like, that's not like we haven't got a long backstory where people were like domesticating seals for this to have occurred.
Yeah, that's a very good point. That's a very, very good point. And this is the type of stuff, like, when it comes to denying the direct interaction between Africans and the Americans, they're more comfortable saying seals. I'm going to get into the slide where they're more comfortable saying monkeys and rats.
Yeah, wasn't you telling me about the fact they believe that monkeys made the transatlantic journey?
Yes, and rats. Scholars believe that. Western scholars believe that, but they say Africans couldn't.
Monkeys built a little raft.
But do you know what? Do you know what's funny about that? What's most like, we're laughing, but it's actually very, very. It angers me. It actually angers me at my core core. Is that what's funny about it? Isn't even that monkeys did it. Perhaps monkeys, like, got stranded on a raft or whatever. But the fact that they will say that first before saying that Africans on the other side, like with a shorter distance to travel, with far more climatic friendly climatic conditions that could navigational conditions that could ferry them across the Atlantic, they'll say monkeys did it first before they'll admit that, there's, and that just blows my mind. It just blows my mind.
It shows the pure racism and the pure animus that they have towards black people.
It's Kwafada is the one he's saying. He said he told me, so he might have been the one who told me. I can't remember, but I think that story is hilarious. Yeah. Either which way, thank you for the comedy there, and shout out Without History in the chat as well. Big
shout
up
out
to
Without History. Shout out to I saw a super chat. I don't want to miss it. Shout out to Christian Hughes 21111. Appreciate that super chat. Got a lot of UK support in the building. Shout out to that. But yeah, this just shows the racism, and I'm just using their own racism to debunk them. Now this gets extensive, right? Because we have extensive evidence of cotton trade before Columbus, particularly Gossypium barbadense and Gossypium hirsutum, and this originated in the Americas. Now, Ivan van Sertima cited this, and scholars stated that no, cotton in the African cotton in the Americas is an ancient, multi-million year hybridization event that occurred when cotton seeds were naturally blown, and they sailed across the Atlantic, and they made it into the Americas, and they naturally hybridized with American cotton. This was always the argument. But studies like by Silo, Stevens, Butcher, Hutchinson, Vendel, multiple scholars argue that human agency is required because natural drift of these cotton seeds is not likely, especially, when you put salt water on the cotton seeds, it basically makes them infertile, or it makes them unable to grow, right? So you see examples of, these cotton species like barbadense from the Americas having a Sanskrit name in India, noted by Chopra and Torkelson. You also see Gossypium hirsutum moving from Mexico to West Africa in the 15th century. This is after Abubakari's 14th century voyage. So the cotton Gossypium hirsutum from Mexico is found in Cape Verde in 1466, according to Stevens and McNeish. And this Mexican cotton in Cape Verde came from West Africa. So West Africans got it from Mexico, and then they traded it to Cape Verde, right? Then you have Gossypium tomentosum in Hawaii, introduced from the Americas. And then Gossypium gossypoides in Mexico shows African-related sequences indicating ancient contact, according to Wendell, Schnabel, Silanen, Foster, and Hu. Then you have Braziliense, Religiosum, Dinariades, Darwini, and Mustellinum, also connected, these cotton species connected to pre-Columbian transoceanic voyaging, right? So this is definitive archaeological evidence on the behalf of cotton.
And we can just see what's going on here, can't we, really?
Yes.
It's like, it doesn't, we have multiple strands of corroboration that clearly identify human contact between America and Africa.
Yep.
And what you're just seeing here is the most illogical reasons being posited to this, to essentially debunk what is very, very, very obvious, and it's like it's unbelievable, just how much. Yeah, it's just unbelievable, like how much evidence is required before you just accept the fact that this contact was made.
Yeah,
Just
we have to go overboard because African-centered scholarship is not respected, and Black people are not intelligent enough, so to speak, to migrate across the Atlantic. But the blonde-haired, blue-eyed Viking, with very little evidence, they can accept that.
Yeah, but even their rebuttals are unintelligent. Like we have to start laughing at them,
Yeah.
for the stupidness they come up with. Like didn't no one laugh at Kraus when he made that seal posture? Oh well, there's the Africans infected the seals, and then the seals swam to America and infected the Americans, and no one thought to ask about what how the humans were coming in such close contact with seals. Like
No,
no
it's
one,
just in
I mean,
nature.
it could have done with the conquistadors, because those men were moving mad with the animals, the llamas and things. I heard that they were getting busy with the llamas. Some of the conquistadors. I don't know how true that is, but it could happen
Yeah,
with those guys.
those, they do like their animal marriages, don't they?
Yeah. I'm gonna go to the bathroom real quick, and I'll be back in a sec.
No, for real. I've not fact checked that, but I wouldn't be surprised. So you never know with the seals, man. You never know with the seals, bro.
Anything with a heartbeat qualifies, isn't it? Let's keep it funky, man.
Oh, it's incredible.
But
The
it's just
most
ridiculous, man, how much they're just doing the most. It's like with everything, they're like, it's almost like it's like arguing with trolls online. Do you know what I mean? This is what this reminds me of. Our scholars have to put up with scholarly trolls. Do you understand what I mean? Like they say, oh, okay, this should be they find a piece of evidence and they're like, well, this should be a slam dunk. Hey, look, guys, they're using the same. This type of cotton they're using here actually originates in West Africa. Okay, so they're growing a type of cotton. Because remember, we're not just talking about the fact that the cotton ended up there. We're also talking about the fact that the cotton is used. Yeah. So this is not just like a single argument made based on the fact that they're carrying the same cotton seed. It's the fact that the cotton seed is being grown there, but it's also being used in the same way. Okay, they're making fabrics in the same way. Yeah, this clearly shows a diffusion of not just the crop but the idea as well. Oh no! What happened was 16 million years ago is these cotton crops shared an answer. It's like, do you understand what I mean? It's like that's like how it is arguing with trolls about Black Egypt or any black civil or the Moors or something like that. It's like they just come up with the most ridiculous anything other than I had someone say to me, we were talking about what's it called, the sorry, I've just got lost the words. The book with all the. So I've had a complete brain freeze.
You're good.
He mentions the Ethiopians and who writes all the stories. The ancient Greek guy, 500 BC. He wrote all the stories. That's who they get.
Oh, the Herodotus.
Not Herodotus. No, the fiction one.
Oh, Homer.
Thank you. Yeah. Homer, the Iliad. Thank you. Sorry about that. Had a complete blame. Yeah. So the Iliad. Yeah. So obviously he's very complimentary about the Ethiopians. Yeah. So then the Eurocentric position is that, oh well, the Ethiopians he's talking about weren't real people. Yeah, he was talking about a mythical nation of Ethiopia that wasn't really on Earth. I'm like, but Ethiopia existed when that book was written. It was a common.
You know what's funny about that though? The very same person will tell you, they could have a PhD after their name, and the very same person would say, "I'm not racist. I'm just showing you the facts." So, but it just so happens that every fact you show me paints my people like the lowest of the lowest. So wherever I cite to you, historical documentation of something positive about my people. You non-racist scholar, you just happen to be the one guy who has evidence to the contrary, but you're not racist. But it's just a nice happy coincidence, is it, that yeah, every time there's some shine for some black person in the annals of history, you non-racist just happen to be the one in the room who says, actually that's all fake, I don't know about that, but you're not
Yes.
racist.
Exactly. and they don't need any evidence, mind you, as well. There's never any evidence. It's like, so what's your evidence that this was a mythical Ethiopia he was talking about, and not the same Ethiopia that everyone in 500 BC was talking about? Well, what's your evidence? Oh, it just was. Okay, that's it. Fine. Moving on.
That's why here we're dealing with legit archaeological evidence that's impossible to deny, right? Look at these bananas. Bananas has been used to show pre-Columbian contact, right? And you have linguistic analysis by Roger Blench. He sees the term cocoa reconstructible among West Africans and Central Africans for banana. And you see similar lexical items in Central and Southern America, right? Now you also see a Proto-Mayan word for banana. And bananas, initially are an Asiatic plant. So you have the Proto-Mayan word for banana dating to the second millennia BCE, right? And then the diversity of indigenous names for banana across South Africa suggests a first millennia introduction that was pre-Columbian. So you see the ethnohistorical records documenting the presence of banana in Mexico and Guatemala. And you have possible banana leaves in Peruvian tombs. Even skeptics like Merrill conceded that Polynesian varieties reached the Amazon before Columbus, right? And Heyerdahl, validates the pre-Columbian transoceanic introduction of bananas to the Americas. The bottle gourd is African. That's the calabash. The calabash, that's Lagenaria siceraria. And you see it's native in Africa, really infra-Saharan Africa. And then you see it introduced in the blue, invasive in the red, and cultivated in that light blue right there. It appeared in Americas very early, 9000 BC in Mexico and the third millennia BC in Peru, documented by Bird, Whitaker, and Brucher, right? And its simultaneous ancient presence in 5th dynasty Kemetic tombs and in India necessitate a transoceanic transfer. A lot of scholars try to say that natural drift, Lathrop, Swearin, they try to promote the idea of natural drift, but scholars like Patino, Mangelsdorf, and Brucher reject this due to its absence in the Antilles and Eastern South America and its early Pacific coast appearance. So oceanic viability, Tal, Carter, Whitaker, they said that's inconclusive. It wouldn't survive transoceanically. Right. So, and its absence in Western Polynesia, but presence in Eastern Polynesia undermines the idea that it was an oceanic drift. And the consensus about scholars is that the calabash from Africa got to the Americas by transoceanic transfer. This is another piece of evidence for you. Lovely Vitis vinifera, the common grape vine that we use for wine, derived from Vinta sylvestris, cultivated in Western Asia and Iran before 2000 BC, introduced to China in 125 BC, right? You see it in ancient Kemet, right? As you can see on the top left. And it had a pre-Columbian presence in the America suggested by the discovery of Vitis seeds, right? And this is in the Proto-Classic era, 200 BC to 8200. And you see some deposits on the Grijalva River in southern Mexico, according to Martinez, right? And they were using it for fermented drinks. And some more evidence for pre-Columbian transoceanic transfer. Lovely grapes. This is the one of my favorites. We got two Yorubas on deck. On the top left, you see Ile Ife pavement. And according to scholars like David Kelly that we discussed before, Americana scholars, you see kernels of Z maize in the pavement cobs, the embedment pavement cobs in Ile Ife. Z maize is from the Americas, right? And it appears in the pre-Columbian so-called Old World through botanical and artistic evidence, right? You have Asian varieties and African varieties of this. You see some maize cobs in Indian temples like the 1st century Badami and the 11th to 13th century Karnataka. It's documented by Johannesson, Parker, and Gupta, and from Sanskrit text. You see it in the Han Dynasty. You see Chinese ceramic bird from Henan with a cob armature, right? And you see it in the Javanese temple relief, in right before 1000, around 800 of the Common Era, you see an Arabic tax record, AD. And then you also again see it in Ile Ife maize cob embedments, maize pavement, road pavements in Ile Ife with Z maize, right? So it had a pre-Columbian presence in the Middle East and Europe, as well as the African continent. And this aggregate data again confirms, ancient transoceanic transfer, from the Americas to the rest of the world. So, do you two Yoruba brothers have anything to say about that?
It's interesting. It's the first time I heard it. So
only that sorry, King. Only that this was amazing to me when I heard that Van Sertima posited it as, I didn't even know that it was supposed to be something that was brought to us by the Portuguese, because for the longest we have our word for corn. We have our own homegrown word for corn. There's no foreign influence. There's no Portuguese influence, as there might tend to be if it was introduced by the Portuguese. There's none of that. There's not even an Arabic influence for our word for it. So when I heard that this was supposed to be something the Portuguese brought, I was like, that's a lot of nonsense. But I remember Haslip Vieira, who did the rebuttal, the main rebuttal that they like to cite against Van Sertima. There's no other rebuttal, guys, apart from this Haslip Vieira article, which is like 40 years old. And it's just a load of rubbish. Apart from him, he claimed that this was not in Africa or whatever. There is an article by another academic. I don't know if you've got it. Maybe it's the I don't know. I'm reading here, but there's another independent white professor who stated that this corn, this maize, was known to West Africans and was being traded with blackamoors up north of Nigeria, north of Mali, well before the Portuguese came. I don't know how far back it goes in West Africa, but I know it's a cope and a massive lie that this was something that was introduced by the Portuguese, for sure.
Yeah, 100%. And it's just another piece of archaeological evidence. Sertima cited it originally, and these two scholars, Sorensen and Johannesson, are confirming it. Now, coke, this is one of those controversial ones that people say has been debunked, right? But according to Plowman, Shady, and Towle, this is a plant of South American origin, used at least 2100 BCE with evidence from Peru, Ecuador, and Chile, right? And you have the detection of cocaine in Kemetic and Nubian mummies dating from 1070 BCE to 395 AD, and by Balabanova et al. And Jet, right? And their confirmation of this was against contamination claims, these two scholars. So coca was grown in the old world, and this was coca grown in the old world as a continual import from the Americas is implausible, right? So these scholars, Sorensen and Johannesson, using Balabanova and Jedetau, posited that the transfer from South America to Kemet most likely happened in second millennia BCE voyaging, right? And then you have Nicotine, Nicodiana tabacum in the same light. Balabanova, Nerlich, and Parsh studied this, and you see that in Ramses II, according to Bucal, 1990. And Wells and Jett rigorously defended the presence of tobacco against contamination claims, right? You have a Sanskrit name for tobacco, tambaku, documented in India, according to Nadkami and Ashraf, right? So again, this validates some transoceanic voyaging that got tobacco to ancient Kemet into Africa, right? So you see it multiple ways. Pineapple, Ananas comasus, this originated in Brazil, cultivated in ancient Mesoamerica, right? You see a Roman relief that you see on the top right showing this. You see it in the 5th century Indian temples. You see it in Israel, and there's also evidence for pre-European Pacific dispersal of this. So, pineapples, or Ananas comasus, is another, fruit and plant that was traded across the ocean pre-Columbus. Porcelain is another one. American.
Can I interrupt, Scamji? Sorry.
Go ahead.
The pineapple that you just showed, there's an even earlier evidence for it. There's one on Phoenician scarab with a black guy
Mm.
There's no two ways about it. He's a black guy.
Yeah,
I've
yeah.
showed that one on my channel. You know about that?
No, I haven't seen that before.
Yeah, it's a clear pineapple, and they tried to say that it's a pine cone. It's ridiculous. But you can see this thing right next to the guy, and the guy is a farmer of some sort, a cultivator of some sort. But it's definitely a pineapple. It looks just like what you're showing here, if not even perhaps more accurate. You can see the diagonal lines. You can see the. It's amazing. It's amazing. It's just unbelievable the lengths they'll go to.
Yeah, yeah. So it's just like, and when we find it in classical Africa and ancient Kemet, they're going to say, "Oh, those weren't black people." So the European scholars are more open to it being in ancient Kemet, right? But across the African continent, they're super, super limited, and we obviously know that it's racist lies. All right. You got porcelain, American originated plant documented in North America, and it appears in Roman gardens. It's noted in ancient Kemetic texts and has multiple Sanskrit names in India like Lonika and Gotika, right? According to Balfour, Pule, and Chopra. It's also documented in Chinese texts from the Song period and Ming Dynasty, right? So again, this is another evidence of pre-Columbian transfer with respect to porcelain. Now you have the drugstore beetle. These are some pathogens that can only be transferred by humans. Stegobium panaceum is a pest of store goods, and it is found archaeologically in Kemet, 3400 BC, and Bronze Age England per Kislev. Panigitacopolu and Bucklin. Right, the same species was definitively recovered in a pre-Columbian mummy in Peru. Right, and contamination was ruled out by Riddle and Vreeland. Its presence in both Kemet and Peru, alongside identical plant drugs, can have no other explanation but transoceanic voyages, pre-Columbian transoceanic voyages. You have the lesser mealworm beetle, or Alphatobius diaperinus, right? And this is in stored goods found in ancient Kemet, 1350 BC, Roman Britain, right? And the same species is identified in a pre-Columbian Peruvian mummy bundle by Riddle and Vreeland. Again, its presence in parallel mortuary contexts on both sides of the ocean affirm ancient human voyaging. So now we have the roundworm, that's Ascarius lumbricoides, and you can see its distribution there in the bottom, right? This is documented in the Kemetic mummy in Mesopotamia, China, India, and ancient Europe. And its confirmed presence in pre-Columbian South America means that it existed in both hemispheres pre-Columbus, since this parasite can only cross oceans inside a human host. Its ancient American presence validates pre-Columbian transoceanic voyaging. Now we're moving on to Strongyloid stercorolus. This is an Old World parasite found in an ancient Kemetic mummy, and its confirmed presence in the Peruvian mummy, according to Verano, as well as a coprolite from New Mexico, demonstrates a pre-Columbian range similar to hookworms. Its biology completely rules out the Bering Strait because it can't survive in the colder climates. It's more amenable to warmer tropical climates, as you can see it in its distribution map. So again, Transamerica. Did I lose y'all?
No, we can hear you. You're back.
All right, for sure. I think I stopped a little bit. So where was I? So this validates Sertima's model in terms of transoceanic voyaging. Hold on a sec. Give me a brief second. I think my background jam stopped. Where are we at here? So what do y'all think of this so far?
It's pretty comprehensive.
Yeah, exactly. There's just so much. There's so many corroborative bits of evidence. King was saying earlier that it beggars belief that we're actually debating this. I didn't know though that there was this much information. I didn't know there was this much information. You did say something earlier I want to touch on. You said you're talking about this no, it was King who said he doesn't know which Africans helped the Europeans across the Atlantic. but there's ample evidence that you had not just coastal West Africans, sorry, not just coastal Northwest Africans, but coastal West Africans. What I want to say though specifically is about Diego the Moor. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of Diego the Moor. Diego the Moor was pivotal, pivotal to Francis Drake and his voyages across the Atlantic. But what you find, as with anything to do with our history, is that his story has been like made completely subservient to Francis Drake's. Whereas actually, when you go digging, he was one of these Africans who knew their way around the Atlantic. I hope I did. I bookmarked and screenshotted some of the information I found about him a while back. But he deserves his own case study, but because there's very you would think that there's very little about him, but there's actually a lot that we can garner from him. He knew his way around the Atlantic, and very, very likely he had sailed across the Atlantic and back before Francis Drake. Because if you one thing that gives it away is the amount of times that just randomly this guy will pop up in Francis Drake's narrative, and you just wonder, if you were to accept the accepted narrative about him, he's just a manservant or quote unquote a slave. I don't think there's any records of him being a slave or being or getting a manumission or whatever. But he wasn't a slave. There's no doubt in my mind that he wasn't a slave. I might be wrong, but there's no doubt in my mind that from what I know, he wasn't a slave. He was somebody who knew his way around the Atlantic, and Francis Drake really, really, really depended upon. But we also have we have a template for this kind of thing happening in more recent times. I stumbled on the story of I can't remember his first name now, but Tajari P. Henson's related to him. He's like a great nephew. He was the first black guy the first man probably to actually reach either the Antarctic or the Arctic, and the North Pole.
Matthew Henson.
Matthew Henson, thank you.
Yeah.
And this guy's story, how this guy hasn't got a movie yet, that just goes to tell you everything you need to know. This guy reached the North Pole before his, the person he was supposed to be serving or helping on the mission, and I can't remember his name now, but this guy was so pissed with him that he didn't speak to him again. He never spoke to him again. Not really just because he beat him to it. He had to because they had to carry this guy. This guy fell sick, right? And so he actually made the first step onto North Pole, but this guy didn't speak to him. This European guy didn't speak to the guy again. And Matthew Henson wrote that it broke him, it devastated him. That something so petty, he'd been best friends with this guy. They've been compatriots and whatever companions on the whole journey. But why I mention him is because we have, at least with Matthew Henson, we have a guy with agency whose story we can hear from him himself. And it's a shame that we don't really have that with Diego, because if we did, I think we would know far more about actually what was going on, how much really these guys depended on Africans to get across the Atlantic. The same thing could easily have been done to Matthew Henson if we didn't have his writings in place.
Yeah, that's actually what Pathy Diang, and we got Reggie in the building. We just came on. Welcome in, Reggie. Pathy actually posited that Columbus learned about traveling from his extensive trade with Senegambian mariners on the coast of West Africa. So before we continue, I'm gonna let Reggie. Reggie, what do you think about what you've seen so far?
I think the conversation is great, and I think that we should have had, or our elders should have had this conversation much earlier. I was a student in the Black Studies Department 82, 83, really 83, 84, when Ivan Van Sertima came and talked to us. And we didn't buy it. We listened to him, but I was in Dr. Jeffrey's advanced class, Dr. Leonard Jeffrey's advanced class. The empirical evidence that Van Sertima showed at that time and even presented was not enough for is not enough. I'm not talking about the other evidence from the other scholars, but Van Sertima's empirical evidence was when he started to get pushback, then he tried to seek the help of to do more research than he had done prior, because his first They Came Before Columbus was pretty much centered on uh, the Abu what is his name,
Abubakari.
Abukari's voyage, right? And then he didn't seek the help of many black scholars, or yeah, and I just say scholars, don't have to be black per se, until he began to get pushback. And I don't think I think that there has been a lot of other scholars who have done great work on this subject. On just to cover a few things that I think is kind of a um, missed, is chronology. Okay, so Van Sertima's statement that they came before Columbus, who have he never he implied it was Africans, right? Uh, he implied that. He left himself open. Okay, that's fine, but there's specific dating on Abu Bakari, and I have a and then there's specific dating around the Olmecs that doesn't necessarily match. So the people, Abu Bakari's people, were not the people who are the Olmecs, right? It happened too quick, happened too fast. Um, for the African to actually reach the Caribbean, because they would have to reach the Caribbean because they're short on resources, and that would be the first stop, and then leave the Caribbean, and then to find themselves in this particular area where there's more evidence, and I think King's monologue spoke about it. Uh, there's more evidence that this was a long period from Oceania. So the when people talk about the distance between, uh, how can I say, the Pacific, well, the Oceania people, with all the different groups that were there, right? There's several different groups there. They was able to reach as far as ultimately the Polynesian groups to Hawaii. To stop from Hawaii to the Americas is much shorter. So over a large period of time. Another thing that's worthy of talking about is the Ganache Islands, uh, the Phoenicians, the Phoenician boat building, which was much more advanced, right? Uh, there's probably better evidence that their shipbuilding was better than the West African shipbuilding for ocean, what can I say, ocean travel, rather than West African travel that hung around the coastline. Um, um, that doesn't close it, but I would ask for some chronology to tie in or not tie in Abu Bakari's voyage if he made it, and then so there is the Phoenician travel, and then we have to get to um, Lucia, what the DNA evidence of Lucia is, and then we also have to look back. Well, when we do Lucia, we have to look at what is the DNA construction of the 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 Ganache people versus what we found, and DNA evidence versus, and then there's something else. If I The Metropolitan Museum of Art has a new exhibit called um, um, the Oceana, right?
Yeah.
Arts of the Oceana, and it's extraordinary. I went there. I've taken some pictures. I can show it to you when we get some time.
Hmm.
But the caps that they wore in Oceania is much more similar to what you have with the Olmec heads. The and then um, the other part on Easter Island, and these people were extraordinary rock builders. They knew how to sculpt rock, right? And so what's in
Reggie, before I have you continue, would you agree with this morphology showing the Melanesians with the Olmec heads?
yes,
That's good. That's good. Continue.
yeah. So then I have to show. Then what I have to do, if I can pull it up, I'm going to show just my quick slideshow to add to.
Okay, can I run through these and then we can come back to that?
Yeah, that's what I want. But please deal with the Phoenicians, right? And the mummies, found the so-called mummies that's found in Phoenicia, right? And so that would track back to some of the other stuff that you was talking about when you were showing the Egyptian mummies, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
And if you could track back to that, and please add in the fact of the matter of the sculptor, not just the shipbuilding, but
Yeah.
the iconography of the of people building these totems in the ground, right? In a similarity. Okay, I'll stop.
100%, 100%. And just to buttress on that point, these scripts, like the Rampa scripts,
Yeah.
found in West Africa, bears close relationship to the Libyan and the so-called Phoenician script. So, according to these scholars, these scripts would have been used by West Africans, and Phoenicians at the same time. There have been some scholars by the name of Atiko Akwanya Bonambela, and other scholars along the Gold Coast. They've discussed some of the onomastic or naming convention similarities between Coromantee in Ghana and the Garamantes. So there are, scholars on the African side who do agree that there's some filiation between these populations. But here again, you see in the Low Mahara and as well as the Tuxtla Stela, some orthographic commonalities, with West Africans and, as we know, Libyan Tifinagh writing people. So if we continue to go on to, we left off at the human hookworm, Ancylostoma duodenale, identified in Kemetic text. Its anemia is identified. So not only was the species identified, but ancient Kemet identified what causes the disease or the effects of the species. Right? It's found in pre-Columbian South American remains. And because its life cycle cannot survive in the cold, Bering Strait crossing is invalidated, right? So scholars like Darling, Soper, and Reinhardt rule out the land bridge migration, right? And then other researchers like Fonseca, Confalonieri, and Ferreira concludes its presence necessitates transoceanic voyaging, right? Again, found in ancient Kemet, described in Kemetic text, also found in pre-Columbian South America, again validating transoceanic transfer. So we went the threadworm, Strongyloid stercoralis. We talked about the roundworm, Ascaris lumbricoides, lesser mealworm beetle, drugstore beetle. So these are the different pathogens. These pathogens necessitate pre-Columbian transoceanic voyaging. Right now, I'm sure y'all have seen the depiction of the Olmec heads with indigenous mestizo Mexicans, many of which have African haplotypes like L3H, right? Haplotypes found in Eastern Africa, haplotypes found in Northern Africa, like H1E, right? So many of these populations that bear affinity with the Olmecs also would have African mixture, according to modern genomic analysis of mestizo populations. But these are some Afro-Mexicans, right? And, some of these Afro-Mexicans would have affinity with Native Americans. They obviously have African ancestry. And you can see some of the affinities between these, local Black Mexicans and the Tutu-Shi, or the Epi-Olmec culture. And then you see Melanesians, as we discussed before. You see some commonalities. Western Americana scholars are more comfortable with the idea of Pacific Islanders traveling into Mesoamerica before Columbus. Even David Kelly remarked that he thought that some of the Black people in Mesoamerica before Columbus were probably Melanesians, right? So he admitted that, yeah, these Black people, these Melanesians likely got to the Americas pre-Columbus, and you can see some of the resemblance here. However, David Kelly noted that the cornrows that he saw, as well as the philtrum or the lip seam, philtra for plural, is something that he observed in African iconography and not so much Melanesian iconography. Not that it wasn't there, but his analysis as an archaeologist saw that, you see that in Yoruba sculpting, you see that in some Bamum sculpting, just the existence of that lip seam or that philtrum. So David Kelly posited that would be more African affinity as opposed to Melanesian. However, if we look at the ancient DNA explorer, we find Y chromosome P1CTS196, and this is associated with Southeast Asia and the Pacific Islands. And this is found in pre-Columbian Mexico in the 10th century individual I-17-112 from Teopa and the 15th century sample BC-23 from Pericus in 1450 pre-Columbus. And then also the 8th century sample 11R from Queretaro. So this genetic evidence of P1, in a sense, would validate the presence of Melanesians, Black Pacific Islanders in pre-Columbian Mesoamerica. So the Black people definitely came from both sides of the ocean to make it to the Americas pre-Columbus. So this is some more epigraphic evidence. You have Dr. Aaron Kamagisha in the Caribbean Journal, and he highlights African skeletal remains found at Hull Bay in the U.S. Virgin Islands, dated to the 13th century, around 1250. In addition, Tiffanyog inscriptions is also corroborated by Dr. David Kelly, discovered at Reef Bay on St. John's Island in the Virgin Islands. Also, this is a Libyan Tiffanyog writing system, and you can see the Tiffanyog letters here at the top left. You can see the inscription that's found in Hull Bay, or Reef Bay in Virgin Islands, and you can see the clear Tiffanyog letters of the Libyan script, and you can see the translation right there. So this is all found in the Caribbean before Columbus, Hull Bay and the Reef Bay. You have Obadeli Cambone, and he documented this pushback. And Obadeli wrote an article talking about how Western scholars accept that Europeans, East Asians, Pacific Islanders, monkeys, and rats all reached the Americas long before Columbus, but they're unwilling to accept that Black Africans, Black people from the African continent, were capable of making the journey. If you look at Monument F, the Olmec Head Monument F, you can clearly see its lips, its prognathisms, its dolichocephalic skull. You can see its afro, high top, fade. It's literally called El Negro or Black Man by museum curators. A lot of people try to say that that's because of the blackness of the stone that was discovered. That's uncorroborated, right? If this was a monkey, some racist scholars try to say that it was a monkey. If it was a monkey, museum curators would call it El Mono, not El Negro.
If it was a monkey, it would have thin lips.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
Monkeys don't have thick lips. So
there's not one way to be African, and so then where do we see this type of stonework specifically in Africa? See, it's the stonework that I'm interested in. It's in the iconography. So where do we see this in West Africa? We would, if it came from West Africa, we should see totems of stone, right? And I don't see that. I don't.
Why do you think it was called Black Man by the curators?
I don't. Okay, so when we have arguments of, and this might surprise some of you, but not all of you. Okay, when I talk about Kemet and Black, I'm talking about Kemet and Black because they actually venerated the word Black, right? I'm not talking about the skin. I'm talking about all the other things that they tied to venerating Black, the animals, the nature, the humans, and right. When I go to when we have these conversations about Black in the in stuff like the Black in Americas pre-Columbus, whiteness wasn't created at that time period. Whiteness as a concept came later, right? So so many of these people, the Portuguese and all of those groups of people, for various reasons, they're not the British whites. They're not the white person. They are mixtures of human beings. So that might bother some of you who are into this, but I do argue, as well as like King's Monologue and my other brother, we argue. We actually come across European scholars, talk to them directly, right, in different ways. And I don't know if many of you know that I talked to Hawass, I'm the only African American who pushed back on Hawass in his house, right? In his house. And so we have to be careful. We're using this word black, but for me to use this word black, I would have to see some veneration of blackness, and then I would have to see stonework like this, indigenous to Africa in this area. For me, not maybe for other people, but I would look, and all black people, all people in what people in West Africa don't necessarily look like this.
Sure.
When we want to define ourselves, we have particular iconography, and this stuff is devoid of the iconography that I'm accustomed to in Senegal, Ghana, Ivory
I'm
Coast.
thinking of the Lady of Guinea. I haven't seen it in a while. But it's like megalithic architecture in Guinea. I don't know if Trill or King know what I'm referring to. But there is something that I could remark dealing with a stone carving out of the side of a cliff.
Okay, but then
Yeah.
I need to see a whole tradition of portable art, or this is megalithic art.
I think there is I mean, I would go to obviously the terracotta works
Yeah,
that you find in Ile Fair. There's a lot of sculptural work. Knock as well gives you similar sculptural works. Actually, stylization wise, the Knock artworks aren't a mile away from this. But I do think we have to also be a bit pragmatic. And this is just, man, this is going to sound like a cope to some people on here, but I'm going to be totally honest. This is my perspective. Africa's had a lot of archaeological kind of like stonework, things that were tangible, deconstructed by colonialism. 100% believe that. Yeah, the stuff that we have, the stuff that survived, is stuff that could, that has been shipped to European museums. But Europe had a very, very, I've done a lot of work, research and Operation Legacy, and the deliberate deconstruction of Africa's towers, Africa's buildings, and
that's
Africa's
my field.
stonework. Yeah. So Africa's stonework, I could show you pictures of, seven-story walls in Kano that don't exist anymore.
Absolutely.
They were deconstructed by the colonists. So they made sure that things that were monolithic, things that kind of were big signals of kind of civilization, for want of a better word, they made sure that they either stole them or deconstructed them.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't have them anymore.
Right,
so
but
I think that I just on a personal one, I think we have to bear that in mind. Also, I just want to add to that point really quickly. When I'm arguing, well, for me personally, I'm not arguing anything, but from this perspective, black to me is not restricted to West Africa. So I don't need to look for evidence of something being in West Africa for it to be black. Because I made that entire point about the Polynesian islands and the Melanesian islands. These are black people. The Cagosians, Diego Garcia, they're black people. Lamu Islanders, they're black people. The Aita people of the Philippines, they are black people. There are people that some of them are indistinguishable from us. The Andaman Islanders, they're black people. So they don't need to have my DNA or have my backstory for me to accept them as a part of the black family and to say this is a black person. I'm not saying this is a Nigerian. I'm saying it's a black person. So that's why I don't conflate the two personally.
No, that's beautiful. I'm gonna give Reggie a chance to respond. But to hop onto that, Cam Bone uses a concept of the ones, the tens, and the hundreds, dealing with like African diaspora from the thousands of years ago to the 10,000s of years ago to the 100,000 years ago, and he deals with it in like gradations. So like some of the Melanesians and Andaman Islanders would be part of the ancient out of Africa migrations. You have recent, Neolithic quote unquote era migrations. And then you have recent diasporas of Africans who have left, like my folks, would be an example of this, who left recently to, pursue economic opportunities abroad. So it's a pretty diverse, dynamic discussion. And I think Carol Davies, when she's talking about the epistemological case for Black identity, discusses that in volume 10 of the UNESCO papers. So it's a conversation that can definitively go both ways, from the restrictionist who would be restricted to the Megalayan period of like black people, and then you get into the Greenbergians or the Painos, who are like only the sub-Saharan Bantu Niger Congo is black, right? To more people who have a general approach. So I'll let Reggie respond, and then we can continue.
Yeah, I'll just respond quickly, and then I'm trying to find out where this video is that I made, this slideshow. But okay, I need to see. I know we have a tumuli tradition in West Africa, right?
Yeah.
And there's good reasons why uh, they buried their ancestors, our ancestors, that way. I need to see a tradition of stonework of particular heads that look like this in Africa, West Africa, for me to move off of this point. Um, Things just don't magically appear, and to be able to do stonework of this particular caliber, I need to see evidence in West Africa in any period, right? For me to make a decision. I am not with the spooky dooky type of stuff, right? I need to actually see, because there's reasons in African tradition why, for the most part, they were more natural, right?
Well, Reggie, is there a reason that you'd be limited to West Africa as opposed to other parts of the continent or other areas where black people exist?
No, well, that's why I'm trying to kind of exclude West Africa. So now we move to other areas in Africa. Uh, most of our, I don't want to be wrong, but most of our traditions are more natural. We do venerate particular kings, but at the time period, there's a time period where there is writing, right? There's a long time period that there's writing. Here we don't see any necessarily writing. So then I have to say, well, these people that was doing this,
In what era?
what do you mean, what era?
Because I had a slide where I showed that. I showed the writing in West Africa from the very, very beginning. Like I showed this one where you see these glyphs, and this is the BCE era with
And
respect to the Rampa.
and this is on what? This is on the monuments?
Well, the ones in the white here, this is the Mohera. The ones in the white here are the Mohera stele and the Tuxtla stele in Mesoamerica. And then these here are a compilation of West African glyphs seen on cattle, seen on
No, not
walls.
that. Are they on those megalithes?
Yes.
Yeah, these are actually on the megaliths, because I see the megaliths behind,
Yeah.
but the writing is on the megaliths.
Are you talking about the stone heads or the stela?
Stoneheads.
No, they're not on the stone heads.
That's what I'm saying. I need to see. That's okay. So there's different things happening at different places. We were talking about the megalith heads.
The megalith. Okay, my bad. So
All
you
right,
so you would so you would need to see writing on the like
to tie
monument.
that to West Africa. To tie
Okay.
that to West Africa, I would, even though not all of West Africa is writing, but certainly the Berber tradition, they're writing, right? The Libyan, the Berber, the Canary Islands,
Yeah.
they those groups of people are writing.
Yeah.
So I would need to, I would need that. I accept what you showed as far as the Libyan, because I agree, but I'd be curious just to try to figure out, where is this tradition in where's this tradition in any part of Africa now? Now I expanded it past West Africa.
Yeah, and I would say that, and as we move on, I would say that in African archaeology, especially when they're comparing, the
Okay, so people in the chat are saying I lack data. I think that everybody knows that if I have to write a paper or present, that's not the case. Can you hear me?
no, Reggie's somebody who's got a
Oh,
long.
I don't. I could cap. Yeah, I don't. I could cap for myself. If you just answer my question, don't get upset with me, right? You say I don't have the data. We're having a conversation on the data. So the question is, it's just methodology. It's a research question, and the research question is tie it in a particular way like that's why I say in the Oceania tradition, maybe the Easter Island.
The
Can
Melanesians.
I
You
can I
got it.
present something? Can I present something?
I'm almost done. I'm almost done. I got a few more slides, and then I'll open the
I
floor.
could be wrong. It's just a research question. But
Because
but that's
I
the
actually
part
have
of it.
to leave in like 40 minutes, so I gotta get this popping.
Oh.
But let me just finish this, and I'll open the floor for everybody to interact, if that's cool.
Yeah.
Hmm.
All right. So again, when we're dealing with the traditions, you have Diang, and Diang is the one who cited Mumuni Kuyate when he had primary documentary evidence. Again, in African context, orator is documentary, and he described not only the voyage of Abubakar in the 14th century, but also trade, subsequent trade. And there's traditions of the Kanta ship, and this is a ship according to Dr. Kamugisha and Dr. Tamowski that could carry 70 tons of cargo, right? Now, according to Dr. Diang's analysis of the Loco and the Zopoli ships, as well as the Mbana ships, right, these were ships that were capable of making the voyage, right? You also have papyrus reed boats from Dr. Heyerdahl that made it from Morocco to Barbados, right, in one trip. And this was built by the Baduma people in the Lake Chad Basin. And Diang speaks about the mole mariners. These are Senegambian mariners who were able to track the different currents, and they were able to track their voyages by stars, star mapping. Now, they had the introduction of Islamic tools like the astrolabe, quadrant, commo, and star-based night steering, right? That was used during that period that could have aided them. But according to Diang's analysis, they were able to make the trip without any of these instruments, right? And you have some eyewitness accounts by the Portuguese, by the Dutch, as well as the French, who documented large vessels as well as experimental crossings. So in terms of the documentary evidence by Europeans, it shows some plausibility. And again, these are not just canoes. You did have canoes like the Loco and the Zopoli and other craft that could handle oceanic rivers. See, a lot of detractors say that a lot of the ships in West Africa are only riverbound ships. But if you consider the fact that there's oceanic rivers driven by these currents, many of these ships, if well directed, could make the journey across the oceanic rivers. And then you also have soon plank and last whole craft, particularly the Kanta, which is from the Songhai people, built by the Sorko fishermen. These are cargo ships among the Songhai Empire, right? And again, these ships, these vessels could enable crossings of up to 2,000 to 3,000 miles. And according to Pathe Diang, off the west coast of Africa by the Senegambian mule mariners, they could reach Mesoamerica. They could reach the Americas in as little as 30 to 45 days on a direct trip. Because this trip, the Mbana ships, they would be about 30 meters long. The Loco and Zopoli ships, they were about 20 meters long. And these ships could reach speeds of about 100 leagues a day, which is around 300 or so miles, according to the analysis of Dr. Pathe Diang, right? So at that top speed, again, they could reach Mesoamerica. Technologically, this is about technological plausibility following the North Atlantic gear loop, the equatorial countercurrent, and the Guinea currents, right? They could reach these places in as little as a little over a month. Now, we have a statement by Dr. Wyant. He's an Olmec archaeologist with 4 decades of experience. And he just gave us some defense to Sertima in the New York Times in 1977. And he talked about his pluridisciplinary approach. And he said, I am thoroughly convinced of the soundness of Van Sertima's conclusions. So if you want to disagree with this Olmec archaeologist, Dr. Wyant, you can. But, he spoke about what he saw as valid arguments at that time. And he's not an average person on the side of the road. He is a professional expert, 4-decade Olmec archaeologist. And he gave some support, for Sertima here. And then again, talking about what these brothers are mentioned, Kamugisha writes this in the Journal of Caribbean History. He talks about Bishop de Landa of Yucatan and numerous Europeans who destroyed ancient artifacts that didn't align with Christianity. He said, burn them all. They are the works of the devil. He ordered the wholesale destruction of Native American books. So you could have had literature written by, some pre-Columbian populations talking about trade with Africans. But these Spaniards burned it because it didn't align with their Catholic agenda, right? So there's destruction of artifacts on both sides of the Atlantic, making historical reconstruction a very difficult task. And again, Dr. Kamugisha, in the same journal, he notes Vasco Nunes de Balboa, Lopez de Gomorar, Laber Brescia de Bourbourg, Frei Gregorio Garcia, reporting that they saw Black people in the Americas. And Quatrefages talked about distinct Black ethnic groups, right, in Florida, Brazil, and St. Vincent. This is also corroborated in the African Union Fact Book. You know, they corroborate some of Kamugisha's findings here. And there's also a map by Sea Captain Carhalet, which showed Black settlements along the South American coast. Again, some of these could be Melanesians. Some of these could be Polynesians. Some of these could be from the South Pacific Islanders. But according to these Europeans, they observed who they saw as Black folks, right? We talked about Thor Heyerdahl's boat from Barbados or from Africa, Safi in Morocco, that sailed to Barbados, traditional Baduma Papyrus Reed boat. You could see it here on the left. And this is, again, technological plausibility showing that the trip is possible, according to Dr. Thor Heyerdahl. And Kamugisha notes the Piri Reis map, redrawn from pre-Christian maps from the Library of Ancient Alexandria in Egypt, shows Cape Verde, Cabo Verde, Madeira, Azores, the Canary Islands, and the Andes Mountains, which wasn't discovered by Europeans until the 16th century in 1527. It shows the Atara River in Colombia and the Amazon River. The ancient Kemites, who drew the original map, which the Piri Reis was based upon, were remarkably accurate with respect to longitude, while European encyclopedias 150 years after Columbus declared that it was impossible to discover longitude. So you have ancient African cartographers, particularly in the Happy River Basin, who had a profound understanding of longitude, which reveals that there's evidence of some transoceanic voyaging. And you can clearly see here a ship, a cedar ship used to trade with punts, which the ancient Puntites, which many scholars have disagreed about the extent of punt. Felix Chami would put it into Central and Southern Africa, particularly looking at the baboon evidence from Kemet in the classical period, the Old Dynastic period, and the New Kingdom period. You have Papio cynicophallus, Papio anubis, found in ancient Kemet, and these are baboon species from Central and Southern Africa. So there's something there with respect to the larger extent of punt, as Dr. Felix Chami from the University of Tanzania has articulated there again. And then, Hauser Vieira is criticized by Kamugisha for promoting the true Negro hypothesis, right? So he said that you can't say a Happy River Valley Basin connection, which is what Sertima posited in the ancient times. You can't say that there's a connection between the classical Nile and Mesoamerica because, the Nubians and the Egyptians don't fit the true Negro hypothesis of Seligman, right? But that is completely invalid because there are people who match the morphology of the so-called West Africans or of, the so-called prognathism that we see among Melanesians, as well as the Tutushi or Olmec heads. You can find them in classical Africa like Mentuhotep, certain renditions of Amenhotep, Kerediwonk. You see these inter-African affinities, Mentuhotep, etc., right? And again, Hazlitt Vieira ignored the feasibility of transoceanic voyages, completely ignored the 13th century African remains in the U.S. Virgin Islands and the Caribbean, and refused to directly address Brzezinski's findings of African affinities in the Tlatelolco skeletal remains. So you have just a biased, hypocritical usage, and you can see a gift from the people of Mexico of a replica to the people of Ethiopia for the support that they gave Mexico, or the support of both nations that they historically had. This was a gift between them. Shout out to Dr. Rashidi. And again, there was an expansion. Sertima gave an expansion of his research in 1987, An Early African Presence, a book that he co-edited with Dr. Ranika Rashidi. And he was invited to address the U.S. Congress over its debates over the 500-year Columbus commemoration. So he was recognized, by his contemporaries as a legitimate scholar. Doesn't mean everybody agreed with him, but to say that his work was completely thrown out, I don't think is the most, it's obviously not the most accurate depiction of what went down, right? So we discussed this earlier, the idea that he was universally rejected is false. Dr. David Kelly, he found merit in a lot of the proposals, particularly the Tifinagh script. He's a professional epigrapher. He deals with epigraphy and archaeological remains. And according to Dr. David Kelly, this Americanist archaeologist, Cornrows and defined philtra, or the philtrum, that lip seam in the middle. This is something that he saw in African sculpting that he didn't necessarily see in the Pacific Islands, as well as the fact that certain pathogens, according to Dr. David Kelly, the pathogens that we discussed before were transferred from Africa to the Americas. So this would validate a pre-Columbian African presence, according to Dr. David Kelly, legendary American archaeologist, right? So again, this is just a misstatement. Again, we discuss Ann Cipher making this misstatement. Bruce Trigger, which is another OK scholar, made this statement. And basically, Dr. Aaron Kamugisha went in to defend Sertima's claim of fostering mutual influence, affirming Native American originality, right? But talking about how the African presence enhances the interconnectedness between Africa and the Americas before Columbus, right? So it was both helping each other, right? And then you have Glenn Daniels. Glenn Daniels did a polemic. We don't really have to get into that. It's in the same vein as Hazavier, Montiano, Barber, Cipher, etc. Very, very Stephen Howe. Don't even want to mention him. Again, ideological bias rather than scholarly analysis. So Kamagisha would excoriate all of these scholars in their biased analysis of the contact model. Then you have James Blount, who was a skeptic against diffusionism, but he respected the model for opposing European racial hegemony, especially as it relates to nautical technology, because according to Blount's analysis, that's not necessarily true with respect to the African capabilities, right? And James Blount, another American archaeologist, he affirmed that Africans did settle in the Americas before Columbus. So again, I think it's the last slide, the idea that there wasn't any professional mainstream archaeologist who supported, Sertima's contact model proposition is completely false. We've explained so many different pieces of evidence and data, just affirming that it's true, right? And now the degree that you want to accept it, that's up to, the individual or the group of individuals. But I think from the linguistic evidence, botanical evidence, pathological evidence, genetic evidence, right, epigraphical evidence, I mean, there's just mountains and mountains and mountains of evidence. So I don't think anybody can say that the idea of African to Mesoamerican contact is implausible or pseudoscientific. You can no longer say it after this presentation. The question is, to what degree? So with that, I'll leave the floor open for y'all brothers to break it down.
That's me clapping.
I'm clapping too. Tell me first. I think that you should publish this, but I would give you some guidance to make it about the evidence and don't make it about Van Sertima. Just make it about the evidence and mention his proposition, but the other propositions, if you're going to publish it, because I don't want to see you not get admitted to conferences and things like that, because people will center back on all this infighting rather than dealing with the evidence that you showed. And if you want to go because there are conferences that you could attend, they're expensive, but you could submit an abstract like Jedama Kekere or Lamarson Forte. He's attended and presented in 3 conferences, RC and twice in ASAR. And but these conferences are open. They're just terribly expensive.
Yeah, they're really, really expensive. Very, very tough. Now, what's his name? Trill, who left. I wish he was still here. He wanted me to share this with you as an example. This is one example of a stone vessel, similar to the stone vessel that we saw, among the Olmecs. And he also wanted to. I'm going to share another one that he had.
No, I listened to him. He's very right. And of course, we got King's monologue here, and but that's a small. These are small. Okay, so this is the problem. Okay, these are more small, what you call portable art. On the other side is the megalith tradition, and that's the difference. So I accept this from Kemet because Kemet and Nubia, they were masters with this. So I do accept that, but then I did make the point that they were netters or they were kings, right? And so I'm interested in writing on the megaliths, any etchings, if it's so, to tie it either way, because I'm not making a big argument. I'm not making an argument on absence of evidence per se, but I would need to see more evidence, because so we can tie it to a particular place.
Well, in that light, when we do our model, because I mean, this model is not the same as Clyde Winters. So when we're arguing for aerial diffusion or contact, we're saying African contact. We're not saying that the entire corpus of their ideology and philosophy was like Black Africa. We're saying that they're indigenous and they traded to a degree, and we're trying to figure out the degree that they traded.
Well, I'm just
And I'd
uh,
agree with that as well.
say what, King's monologue? What you say?
That's I was gonna say. I was just gonna say I agree with that premise. That's kind of the premise that I come from. But also, I would just add to that we have to note that the indigene of America had black people infused in it anyway. I think that's the part that people are overlooking, is that it didn't require the West African genetic contribution, a direct West African genetic contribution to blacken that population. I think the population had a black, had a black population, just like the modern Indian Ocean populations.
Well, okay, so we're having I wish we were just closer. We didn't have a big ocean separating us, King's monologue, so that you can peek into what's happening in what you call Black America and the enormous infightings that
The
we have.
abos, you talk about the abos and the
APOs, the
FBA.
FBAs, all of this pseudo judo conversations without uh, any type of methodology, right? And so you can't peek into it. So I have to be very careful, right? I have to.
I'm very aware of it, though, brother Reggie. I'm very aware of it. It finds its way to me as well.
Yeah, so it's but over here it's, we've had the big, I debated the Moors, that, right? The Moors, the American Moors Science Temple of America. I debated them, right? Big debate, nasty, right? So we have a lot of old elders that we kind of like make them deities, right? Prophets and deities, and people don't want to remove, and they don't want to go to a damn research library and figure it out for themselves. And so I see in this, even in this chat, I'm getting pushback, but um, hmm, write a paper, get some published in a journal, do what I do what I do, and work hard to do, and then maybe you can push back. But when I just ask for evidence, I'm just simply pushing Camdy Verse and King's Monologue and my other brother. Uh, that's all I'm asking for. But if you don't want me to ask for the evidence, then it shows that you can't be in this, because Europeans are very well trained. They will shoot you down on a minus detail because you didn't read it, right?
Reg, what's surprising to me is that Haynes. I recently read his excerpt from his dissertation. Edward Haynes, he's a Black American scholar, and I saw numerous indications that there were commonalities between Mandinka writing systems and Epi-Olmec, but none of the scholars ever published the evidence. But when I was actually looking at the evidence over the past few days, I was shocked at how many commonalities, not only between the Epi-Olmec and the Mandinka writing, but how a lot of West Africans were using similar writing systems that we see in the Tifinagh in northern Africa.
Mm-hmm.
Shows me that they were either trading or they come from the same root, right? Garamonte or so, or infra-Sahelian ancestral commonality, right? And it was staring me right in the face. And Haynes in his dissertation said that that orthographic evidence would be the specific archaeological proofing that was lacking, when the current anthropology did their little dismissal in 1997. Because with that, I mean, it's pretty hard to deny, especially if you have the inscriptions, coterminous with the Epi-Olmec era.
And evidence is all that we need. It helps us make a case. Nobody should be
Mm.
scared of evidence. It's just how we analyze the evidence. It's and to make a case. But people who look, you're very close to, you know, in King's monologue, and
Yeah.
y'all do very good work. Um,
Thank you,
to
sir.
begin to make these cases that are unrefutable. I mean, when I talked to Dr. Zahi Hawass, I was like, yeah, I'm doing this for King's monologue. You know, you know, he can't, he couldn't. It's the $800, right? It was the $800 to get in the room. So they Cam Jedamark and Dr. Ricketti students, Dr. Ricketti Ahmed students, they chipped in and got me into the room, and so that was $800 just to get in the room and for a try to talk to him. And they didn't think that I was a Black American. They probably thought I was Ethiopian or something like that. And because you don't come across too many Black Americans, right? So
You
he
could
let
pass for a Nubian, definitely. Sydney's Nubian.
uh, he messed up and he let me speak. But I know King's monologue would have done the same thing, but he would have did the same thing to King's monologue than he did to me. He would just talk, and give you no pushback. But I'm Black American. I'm gonna run up on the stage and I'm gonna push it back, or right. I'm not gonna
Yeah.
accept that, right? Yeah. So
Yeah, I got it. I had one more thing. King, did you want to share something? Or was that Trill
I
before?
wanted to share something
Yeah,
real
yeah,
quick.
go ahead. Go ahead. I
Um,
got about 15 more
I just
minutes.
gonna I just gonna jump in really quick, so go on.
For sure, for sure. Go ahead.
No, because I just wanted to jump on the you talked about the Mandinka early,
Yeah.
and there's so many overlaps with Mandinka culture. I think one of the earliest bits of research that I did in on this topic, and I haven't done anywhere near as much as you guys have, so I'm not going to try and advertise like I have. But I remember years and years and years ago, I did a presentation, and I found a native Mali or Mandinka outfit that mirrored precisely what Quetzalcoatl looked like.
Mm.
Now I know that's a slightly different era. I know Quetzalcoatl came after the Olmec, but you could see it was a strong argument for the origin of that kind of like depiction of this,
Yeah.
black man with these tassels and the exact colors as well, the red, yellow, and the green. This is a traditional Mandinka outfit, you know.
Yeah.
So it's funny because there's also obviously, and this is the part that's discounted. There's the many Black Americans have high amounts of Mandinka ancestry,
Yes, that's true.
high amounts of
Very, very.
Mandinka ancestry, and yet we don't really have the transatlantic trade route from Mali, which is really Northwest Africa. We
Yeah.
don't really have the direct trade route there. The trade route was really the Guinea region of Africa, not
Yeah.
Mali. And yet you got, I think Dr. Rick Kittles, who's a geneticist, I think he's like something like 58%, if I remember correctly, Mandinka. And this
My
is
wife
very common in
too.
America. So yeah, so you have to, so that's a more plausible origin, is that Mandinka ancestry, which will never get classified by genetic companies as being native or
Yeah.
indigenous, might have a pre-Columbian or probably has a pre-Columbian origin. But I just want to throw that there.
Acceptable, but they did drag some of the ships, from the pickup places. They dragged them all the way up to, depending on who was going to Senegal, because they offloaded and onboarded different African captives, and Goree Island is probably the closest part where where if they had permission, they would stock up for water and stuff like that. And so um, some of the people from Mali probably would have been, and like the Gambia, would have been held, uh, on Goree for the trip, for the longer trip, or it would have been a stop off. So,
Most
anyway.
definitely.
So real quick, this is not going to take too long. All right, this is Oceania. These are from Oceania is huge as far as the islands is concerned. So I didn't label where these pieces came from, but you can see the skull cap, right? The broad nose, slightly different than some of the work, but you can actually see that. If you went to Oceania, we get that. I get a better map. If you went to Oceania, you start seeing images like this, and these type of images, these type of totems. If you found them in America, you would think that some of these were African, right? Not maybe necessarily all of them, but you would immediately think of Africa, but it's Oceania. There's scarification, right? You would see things like that. That's in Oceania, right? And some of them look specific Oceania, but some of them, if you actually found these in South America, you might think Africa directly, but not Africa. So I'm almost finished. Cowrie shells, right?
Yeah.
Etchings, right? They had a big cowrie shell tradition in Oceania, right? Such as West Africa, the totems.
Hmm.
This is interesting because the museum on the floor divides like the art of Oceania, and then it divides over here the art of the Americas, right?
Mhm.
Right. And so, like you're crossing from the art of Oceania, which is over here, to the art of the Americas over here, right? So they did some really good work in this new exhibition that they did. You would probably think that that is from West Africa.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, some of these other pieces, I'm almost finished. West Africa, you might think that.
That looks
West,
like Bamuleke stuff.
see, right? So, right. So, and yeah, Congo and type stuff like that. You
Yeah.
would you would think but it's not. It's Oceania. So, here's the skull cap again,
Yeah.
right? Skull cap. Um, that's modern. That's modern, right? Definitely not African. Definitely not African per se. Look at the Egyptian, Ptah, right?
Yeah.
So I'm almost finished. So this is the tribal costumes that they wore in Oceania. You if you saw this, for some part you might say West African,
Yeah.
right? Look at this piece over here, except for the bone in the nose, right? The etchings, you might be confused, right? The head shape is a little bit different, right? Right. I'm
Some of
almost
these people even say that they came from Africa, like in Fiji, 4,000 years ago.
along. Oh, look at this piece right here, right? You would definitely see that this is West African.
Yeah, you would assume that it looks like someone from Nigeria.
Exactly, right? Uh, right? This
Yeah.
might be that might be a shift,
Pieces.
right? So I got two more pieces, and that's about it.
That's what's up.
And so
They're
the
really good.
yeah, there it goes. So there we go. So I'm glad you're doing this work, and we got some great people on here. It's just that uh, sometimes all answers can't be questioned. You just do better work. But Ivan Van Sertima did not really talk about Oceania. He
No,
did not
he
talk about
didn't.
yeah. Okay, so there you go.
Yeah, he didn't. And I'm saying that, like, according to the genetic data, like there was a mixture, right? Because if we look at BTM 91 and BTM 182 as well as P1, you can see transoceanic transfer happening on both sides, the
Mhm.
Pacific and the Atlantic. So there was like a mixture that occurred in that region. And I think that we could speak about, like Trigger talked about, more work needs to be done
Mhm.
connecting the cultures of the Black populations around the world. We
Smart.
definitely do. It's a
And
fact.
not necessarily the Renoko Rashidi way. See,
Yeah, I know you told me about that.
Ivan Van Sertima and the Renoko Rashidi, that was for a particular Black awakening.
Yeah,
Now listen,
we got to continue
UNESCO
the
is
work.
opening up to us.
Mhm.
UNESCO is opening up to us. This is Series 9 is all African. It's African centered, right?
Yeah,
So we should, for the scholars that want to work with us, right? That want to work with us because the research is common. We have to kind of change and be able to use their work, introduce it to the public, and but also try to qualify it. And then we watch this. The problem again with Ivan Van Sertima and the rest of them is that they didn't work with he didn't work with a lot of black scholars here. He did his own work to be like, aha. He didn't work. He did the Journal of African Studies, I think. He invited black scholars into to it, but he didn't do a lot of work. I stopped. I've said
He
it.
is an edited compilation. And I will say this: look, I have respect for Anoka Rashidi for showing people the possibilities as a photographer. Showing people the possibilities. I know that you definitely have your disagreements with his methodology, but I would look at myself
No
as
method. What method? What the problem is methodology means that you're expansive and you put in all the ideas, right? But you don't. How can I say? You don't erase data, and some of the data that was there was there. We didn't get to Lucia. You do that in another show, the DNA of Lucia.
Yeah, I have some data corroborating that in one of my videos, showing Baja Californians with craniometrics that is closer to Melanesians.
You my man, Camdy Verse. I just don't want you to be. I don't want you to do this and make it about Evan Van Sertima. Make it about the evidence.
For sure.
Sertima, if with the evidence that he showed that could be corroborated, if he did real empirical work, that's fine. But right now, it's empirical work.
100%. And I will say that on the point of that we were talking about before, Lamin Baji, you remember at the Beyond West Africa conference, he actually gave architectonic and structural analysis detailing the similarities between ancient Kemetic, false door monuments and different architectural implements in Southeast Asia. And for me, as a structural engineering background, that was something that was incredibly fascinating and something that would definitively be an empirical continuation of the right work. Right. So that's what my channel is about, collaborative, Africological scholarship. All voices are welcome except the Panos and the trolls. And, I told y'all this last time. Trill is the reason that I got on this path. There's a beef, there was like a little bit of a debate on the server. And, we were just getting trolled to no end. So I said, I'm going to read this data and actually come to a conclusion that's against, the Haza Vieiras and the Montianos of the world who wanted to discount, all Black scholarship just because of the mistakes that, mistakes or non-mistakes that they accused, Sertima of making. And as you said, it's not about one person.
Yeah. Well, shout out to you, I was going to say, because I was talking to Trill Black earlier, and I said, you definitely change your perspective on this topic.
For sure.
I really respect that. I was literally saying it to you. We were on the call and you weren't there, and I was saying there's a lot of people, because I've done some U-turns. Trill Black has even said he's done U-turns, but I always respect that, man. The fact that I knew that you had a different perspectives about this, but then you've read into it and you've like, this is what I think now. So I just want to say that I respect that so much, brother.
For sure.
Hey, Kamji, send King Monologue my my email. I do watch your show. Trying to get on. I have research. I argue back and forth over here.
Yeah.
And I don't really disagree a lot with your work because you're killing them. You're killing them.
Killing the Metatrons of the world, right? And for those of y'all out there,
I appreciate you, brother. Thank you so much, man.
For those of y'all who out there, because a lot of the Panos, Pan-Africanists in name only, they think that I'm some type of abo. But if you've been following my content, I've always considered the Aborigine side of things, despite their numerous eras, as more definitive and legitimate than the Greenbergian promoting Africanist, who literally base their African tribal identity off of insults from European ethnographers. I've said that ad nauseum. And again, this contact model isn't affirming any of the propositions of the Abos or the Pretendians, because this is all African. This is African contact. This isn't any ancient alien stuff or denying African affinity. So no, this is not promoting the Abos or the Pretendians. I've been straightforward with that. I've been consistent with that.
I'm gonna kill one tonight. I have at 8 o'clock. I'm gonna speak to a copper, a sister. She's gonna try. She's attractive. She's attractive. Yeah. She's gonna use that, and I'm gonna give her no quarter. I'm gonna compliment her, right? Yeah. I would treat her like a sister, but I'm going to give her no quarter, and she's going to have to show some empirical evidence to me. See, they treat me really bad because they treat me like I'm just one of the people. I'm 60 years old. I studied with some of the greats. I disagreed with them. I disagreed with some of the greats, my own people that I was studying with, right? I've seen Van Sertima, Runoko Rashidi, Malana Karanga, Asante, Dr. Carruthers, was able to take a course with the great Dr. Ricchetti, Dr. Leonard Jeffries, was going to meet Diop in 86. I got there July. He died in February or March, right? Like I have been, some people think I'm young and I'm their age. I'm not. I just dress urban. I'm granddaddy. I'm papa and shit, right?
No, that's what's up. That's what's up. No, you're definitely a community scholar, and you've taken a lot of hits over the years.
Community scholar. I'm a scholar. I do teach to the community, but I will jump in a conference any day. I know I've met Stu Tyson Smith. I've talked to him. I've talked to Vanessa Davies. I've talked to Dr. Kara Cooney, Dr. Winneman.
I'm saying that you rub shoulders with the niggas, for the lack of a better word, the people who don't treat you right.
Yeah, I rub shoulders because they're the ones they're the worst. They don't go to libraries. We have some of the greatest museums and libraries in New York City, right, on the East Coast, and I never see any of them scrubs in there. But you know what, King's Monologue, please stay. Look, man, they will touch one of your illustrations, and they will commune with that ancestor. That's who I'm dealing with.
Let's get it. All right, I'm gonna end the stream, but we could have a little convo in the back chat about the future. But thank you everybody for joining in and supporting. You could hit either my Cash App or Reggie's Cash App in the description if you want to support the show. Shout out to y'all for hanging with us despite the technical difficulties, and I hope to catch you on the next one.
Peace, Joe Bailey.
Thanks, everybody. Cheers, Kanji, man.
I worked at the Schomburg, by the way, for